We're back, joined, I'm very pleased to say, by the Deputy Director for Research at a terrific organization in Washington, D.C., the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He is Oren Kessler, and he has also been associated in the past with another of my favorite organizations, this one in the United Kingdom, the Henry Jackson Society, where he was a Middle East Research Fellow. A man with long expertise, both as a journalist in Israel and in the think tank world, in matters involving what we wanted to talk with him about today, namely what is going on in Egypt at the hands of jihadists who have neither the interests of the Egyptian people, it would seem, nor ours, needless to say, in mind. Oren, welcome. It's good to have you with us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you've been writing and, needless to say, thinking a lot about the unraveling security situation in Egypt. There was a Bloody Wednesday event recently. Talk a bit about that as kind of a prism, perhaps, through which to look at what's happening more broadly.
Well, on Wednesday, the local Islamic State affiliate, it's a group that used to be called Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, but pledged allegiance to Islamic State, late last year, they launched an attack of sort of unprecedented sophistication and deadliness. They ended up killing about 70 Egyptian troops, policemen and security forces, and a few civilians. The attack was launched in about 15 places at once in the North Sinai, near the border with Gaza and Israel. And crucially, they took over land. They took over the second biggest town in the Sinai for the very first time, and they held it for several hours before the Egyptian forces were able to get them out of there. So just the scope of this attack, its sophistication, and the fact that they've taken territory for the first time is what makes this particularly significant.
The degree to which this was a frontal assault, if I can use that expression, on the Egyptian military suggests, and one conducted by the Islamic State to boot, suggests not only a greater degree of sophistication and capability, Oren Kessler, but also a willingness to challenge directly the authorities of Egypt. Are we seeing that sort of challenge elsewhere, if not at the hands of the Islamic State, those of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is, of course, much in evidence in Egypt even still?
So just 2 days before this Bloody Wednesday, there was another hugely significant incident in which the Islamic State, apparently it was the Islamic State, killed Egypt's top public prosecutor. This is someone on the level of the Attorney General here in the U.S. He was traveling in an affluent neighborhood of Cairo, and he was assassinated in a massive car bombing. And Islamic State subsequently took responsibility for this. So what we're seeing is, whereas these attacks from Islamic State and its predecessor were once mainly confined to the Sinai Peninsula, we're seeing more and more of this violence spreading into the mainland, into Egypt's populous heartland. And you asked about the Muslim Brotherhood. From the perspective of the Egyptian government, these are all essentially tentacles of the same animal. Cairo
which happens to be an accurate assessment, don't you think?
Cairo has consistently describes the Muslim Brotherhood as a progenitor of all of these Islamic extremist groups, and historically, I would agree with you, Frank, that it's hard to disagree with that. Many of these groups, jihadist groups, consistently cite people like Sayyid Qutb, the Brotherhood visionary, as it were, or ideologue. Ayman al-Zawahiri, the head of Al-Qaeda, his roots are in the Brotherhood in Egypt. But as far as Cairo is concerned, these are all essentially, this is one great enemy. And you'll often hear things from Cairo to the effect of, well, whatever you call it, Islamic State, Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, it's all the same. So Egypt essentially accuses the Brotherhood of working directly with Islamic State. I'm not sure that's the case. The extent to which the Brotherhood is actively pursuing violence against the authorities in Egypt, it remains unclear. There seems to be some of it, but it seems to be in large part the work of rogue actors. It's unclear whether the Brotherhood leadership has actually made the decision to wage a violent uprising or campaign against the government.
Let me ask you about what's going on now vis-a-vis Hamas, the other arm of the Muslim Brotherhood operating in Gaza. The Egyptian government has, of course, closed most, if not all, of the tunnels that were used to supply Gaza with arms from Iran and elsewhere. Is the evidence, and I think you've reported to this effect, now that Hamas is working with the Islamic State in Sinai? And if so, how are they doing that under the noses of the Egyptian authorities?
So that is the accusation that Israel has leveled, namely that Hamas, that Israel has concrete information that Hamas helped Islamic State, habitually helps Islamic State, and perhaps helped Islamic State in this particular Bloody Wednesday attack. I'm still looking into the details of that. I'm still looking for clarity on how exactly that worked according to the Israelis. Egypt and Israel are working extremely closely. And this is all sort of under the radar. It's not done publicly, but the two countries are working extremely closely on the intelligence front, on the security front, to secure the Sinai. And in fact, there are rumors in Egypt, and these are rumors which can't be dismissed out of hand, that it was actually the Israelis who conducted the F-16 strikes on Wednesday against Islamic State in the Sinai. These strikes were so precise that even Egyptians who habitually accuse Israel of indiscriminate force and against Gaza said, you know what, this can't be the work of our own Air Force. This must be Israeli.
Only they're that good. We're again speaking with Oren Kessler of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's its Deputy Director for Research. He is also a former reporter for the Jerusalem Post and also worked at the Haaretz English edition in Israel. So you have a good sense, needless to say, Oren, of how all of this looks from the Israeli side of the border. Sinai, of course, was part of the territory that was relinquished subsequent to the Camp David Accords. Do you think Israelis are reconsidering the advisability of having turned over this vast area? And may I ask also, is there a concern for the multinational forces, including ours, that have been placed there, if this jihadism continues to accelerate?
I'll take the second question first, because it's the shorter answer. The international forces in the Sinai, about half of which tends to be U.S. forces, has come under attack on a number of occasions. For the most part, emerged unscathed, but my understanding is that it is sort of hunkering down. It's not conducting the patrols as widely as it used to. It's spending more and more time on its base. There have been mortar attacks on its base, and I actually last year I spoke to the head of that organization, and there was certainly a sense of concern on their part. Not panic. Nobody's talking about packing up and leaving, but there's certainly concern. They're fairly vulnerable out there. The Sinai is a large and desolate place, and they're certainly concerned. As for your first question, namely Israelis' perceptions of the Sinai and whether it was a mistake to make peace with Egypt, look, it's undeniable that every piece of land, every territory that Israel has withdrawn from has become a terror springboard. We now see that with Sinai, but previously, of course, we saw that in South Lebanon, which is now controlled entirely by Hezbollah. We've seen that in the Gaza Strip, which Hamas has taken over. And, of course, there's a tremendous potential for that to happen in the West Bank should Israel pull out completely. However, I think that it's a fairly consensus issue, at least with the Sinai, that in Israel, that it was the right move to make.
And I'm sure that feeling is greater today with Morsi out and El-Sisi in Egypt and the kind of cooperation that you're talking about. Oren, we're over time. I'm afraid we have to leave it at that for the moment, but I hope you'll come back to us again very soon. This story, I'm afraid, is going to continue to unfold, as will other parts of your portfolio in the Middle East. Keep up the good work at FDD, and we'll look forward to talking with you again soon. Cliff Kincaid joins us next. We'll talk about Obama's mentor straight ahead.